Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, this is Season 1, Episode 19 of The Bolder Woman here on Wisp Sports, and I'm Chris Stafford.
You've put your courage to the test, laid all your doubts to rest. Your mind is clearer than before, your heart is full and wanting more, your future's at the door. Give it all you got, no hesitating. You've been waiting all your life.
My guest this week is British Eventer Lucinda Green, who, as she approaches her 66th birthday, has not lost 1 ounce of her passion and dedication to horses and to horse sport. Lucinda epitomizes being a sportswoman, whether she's training horses or coaching riders around the world or competing on her own horse. She began riding at the age of 4, but didn't own her own horse until she was 15. Be Fair proved to be a birthday present that would launch her career, and their partnership forever be carved in the history books of the sport. They made their Olympic debut in 1973, and this was only the beginning of Lucinda's success, as she went on to claim a number of gold and silver medals, including 2 European championships. In 1977, Lucinda scored a hat-trick, coming first at Badminton, Burghley and the European Championships. She is the only rider to have won the prestigious Badminton 6 times on 6 different horses from 1973 to 1984. Lucinda has won the Tony Collins Trophy, awarded to the rider with the most British eventing points in an eventing season, a record 7 times. Arguably, no one has done more to promote the sport and influence generations of event riders than Lucinda in her role as British Team Selector, coach, trainer and journalist. Lucinda still competes on her own horse and has no groom to help her. Instead, she enjoys the sport with the same enthusiasm as she did some 50 years ago. Lucinda, welcome to the programme and thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
You and I go back a very long way in the sport, but this is, of course, a wider audience who may not be familiar with your contribution to the sport of eventing. And I know to many of us in the sport, you're considered a legend. How does that sit with you?
I tell you what, if you ever think anybody's a legend, they've got to be 150 years old, haven't they? So that's how it sits with me. One thing makes me say, well, leg end, so what? Leg end is really how I see a legend. And another thing is you see a leg end, yes. Another thing is you see it as something of extreme age. So, you know, I'm very flattered, but I don't think it's really quite me.
But when you look back on your achievements, when you were at, the pinnacle of the sport as a competitor, how do you reflect on that? I mean, do you reflect on that as someone who, has accomplished what you've accomplished from a third-person perspective, or is it something that you take, take a more personal approach to, and it is the way you wanted your career to go?
No, it's complete third person. It's a very good phrase that you use, but I always look at it and think of that lucky girl who did so luckily well. Never crosses my mind it's me.
Well, it is you, and you have really achieved so much in your lifetime, and still continue to enjoy the sport as you did when you were a teenager. I mean, 50 years ago, going to competitions, getting your own horse ready, taking your horse yourself. When you could have, I'm sure lots of young girls out there would give anything to groom for you.
I didn't think they would. And I'm very happy toddling along on my own, but I do love having somebody there to help sometimes. It depends how quickly. There's 3 phases in eventing: dressage, show jumping and cross country. All these, that's the order they go in when you're just doing a one-day event. They can sometimes come very close on each other, and then you actually do need some help. You've got to walk the courses and get the number and pay the stuff. And actually on a one-man band, there's suddenly a lot to do. But if it's well spread out, it's fine. You don't need anybody else until you fall off, and then you do.
Right. You need someone to take your horse home, or at least help you.
Well, if you fall off, you're a bloody nuisance to everybody because you probably then can't drive your own horse home. And eventing actually says they'd rather you didn't come to an event on your own, because if you do fall off, they want to be able to hand the horse over and not have to try and run the event and look after your horse. So fair enough.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to take you down memory lane, Lucinda, to way back to the beginning, because you first started riding when you were knee-high to a fetlock. You were 4 years old, I understand. Do you remember those very earliest days?
Well, because I've seen the pictures of them, I'm not quite sure if I remember the pictures or if I remember it. I just remember my dad saying, well, I'm probably a bit older than 4, you could put her in a cage of lions and she'd tame them. And I never, ever understood what he meant by that, but he must have seen some affinity that I had with horses. He was a horseman via the cavalry, where before they mechanised the army, he'd been very much involved in horses. And when they did mechanise the army, he continued to be very much involved with them. So I reckon he didn't know a single thing about eventing, but he knew about horses. And he recognised something in me that made him say that, and it never made any sense to me. I'm certainly not going in a wild horses stable even now, but he just recognised an affinity, I think.
And did you feel you had an affinity with animals generally, you know, with dogs or cats or any other animal, farm animal?
No, not especially. No, my mum said I think you should have a dog when I was probably about, 18. And I think she said that because she felt that I needed to develop more of a feel. I think she's quite right. I think you do need to go out with an animal. I'd had the guinea pig and the rabbit and the goldfish and hadn't had more than that, but they never were hugely important parts of my life. But I think it's important that you do have an animal or two around when you're growing up, so it gives you another slightly more sensitive dimension to thinking of yourself the whole time.
When you look back at those early years then, and your formative years around ponies and horses, what do you remember and what do you think was the catalyst to you dedicating your life to the sport?
Very interesting question. I just loved horses. And that's something that it's hard to figure that away from somebody. And my parents saw it, but they said, you can't have a pony until you've learned to ride, and you're not having a pony before you're 8. And you're going to go to the riding school twice a week until then, because there's no point in having a pony until you know how to look after it, you know how to ride it. And they were true to their word, and they did give me a pony, which was incredibly generous of them, and very stuffy New Forest pony for £125, who was a wonderful, probably the best trainer of all the horses I've had, because he taught me 2 of the greatest assets I've got. One was that if I touched him in the mouth over a fence, he'd stop at the next one. And 2 is if I didn't hit him, if he took off, he'd stop anyhow. So I learned the timing of giving a horse encouragement with the whip, which to those of you that don't know about horses might sound awful, but some horses just need that little bit of extra encouragement, and especially if they're lazy New Forest ponies. And it's a timing that's quite difficult to get, because if you do it too early, you get the wrong answer. You do it too late, and the horse has already stopped. It's quite a timing thing, and Jupiter, it's a very small pony, taught me that, and taught me not to hold on to his mouth in the air, because he needed to use his head and neck. And that stood me probably in the best stead of any other amazing amount of lessons that the horses that followed him and the ponies that followed him taught me.
So who was your inspiration then in the very early days? Did you have any heroes?
My inspiration that I remember was when I had grown up, and to be fair, my horse-to-be had been given to me as a 15th birthday present. And I was very aspired to be like the then world champion, Mary Gordon-Watson, who's won the world championships in Ireland when I think they were only 2 of them that got over one particular fence. And so she won it. And she became a friend and a huge encourager to me. And I used to stay with her and take my horse to be fair. And she and her world champion and me and my horse would go off on hacking on the downs, following the lurchers. And it was beautiful. So she may not have as such taught me anything, but she gave me this enormous encouragement. And it probably did teach me lots, but that's not what she was there really as a morale booster. That's what she served as.
So what would you say was your biggest motivation then to go on and be competitive and be the best you could be in the sport?
I've no idea. I think fascination. Okay, how much there is to learn, And if you did manage to learn it, how much you could achieve, but then you always had to learn something else because every horse is different and every competition is different. So you were never there. You never got to the end of the rainbow. And I think the biggest driving force throughout my career has been the formation of the trust, the bond between your horse and you. And that then is put to the test at different levels of competition. And the highest level of competition, badminton or whatever, is the ultimate. And you can't just get on a horse and go to badminton. It takes years of training of him and of developing that bond of trust.
When you were in school, in your formative years, did you do any other sports that you were competitive at? Where does that competitive spirit come from?
Well, I love sports. Everything. I love sports. But I think I was always taught to lose gracefully. And I sort of was very keen on netball, very keen on lacrosse, very keen on tennis. And then for some reason I started going against the school regime altogether at 14, 15. I started playing lacrosse with my left hand, being right-handed. And they never noticed. They just dropped me from the team, which is exactly what I wanted. Because for whatever reason, I was just going through an odd period of time when I think probably it's the time when the African tribesman kills his lion and becomes a man. I had sort of almost dropped out of school and had a mass of friends and just started not talking to anybody. I didn't know what was going on. But my mother recognised it and bravely took me away and sent me to an alternative place where I couldn't have my horse, but I at least could learn some fascinating things. School had become incredibly stagnant and incredibly boring. And she sent me somewhere where I learnt all the lovely things you never had planned to do because you had to get on with the syllabus of the bloody, in those days, O-levels. And we did world politics and philosophy and religions and history of art and fascinating things. And it was a year long. So I left school at 16 after having been at that place for a year, which I'd gone to 2 years before any of my peers.
So in terms of, that transition from education to a career, what was the turning point there? How did you choose which direction to go?
It just sort of, because I had this horse Be Fair that I'd had as a 15th birthday present, he then, with a lot of help from a lot of other people as to how to learn to ride him, he then turned in a good enough performance at one or two events to make it worth him going to badminton. I still am amazed how little we'd both done before we went to badminton. And he then came fifth at badminton that first year and won it the next year. And so really there was no looking back. But having had that monumentally fast start to a career, I was 19, I think, when he won me badminton. I then fell from the highest portal of the sport, and nothing went right for ages after that. I think I had 5 falls in 5 major international events. I remember saying to myself as I bore down on ledges, which is the second time it had been held in Boston, America, and they paid for a plane load to come over from Europe, and I was one of them. I remember saying, if my horse Wide Awake and I can't get round this without a fall, I am giving up, because these horses are not worthy of, they don't deserve to have somebody on top of them that does nothing but make them fall. And thank goodness he didn't fall. And he got round, and that turned a critical corner, because I really had thought I should give up then, because that's a lot of falls to have. And sort of it went on from there. But as a career, you never really consider it a career, because I reckon a career is earning money, and you were never earning any money; you were spending everybody else's.
Well, absolutely. So how did you get to the point where it was going to be what in those days it wasn't a professional career, but it would be considered a professional career now then, and it was self-sustaining, and you actually put everything into it and got more horses?
Yeah, I mean, it was only self-sustaining because my father went back to work at 75 in order to try and help finance it, because you don't finance yourself as a rider unless you do a lot of other work. And at that age, I wasn't really fit for purpose to do a lot of teaching or breaking into other people's horses. I do remember breaking into my horse, and I thought, well, okay, I'll try. And I think I did an all right job, but I mean, I'd never been done that before, so I wasn't about to cut my teeth and make a living breaking in horses. And he did go back to work and sort of kept me going. And he actually, I learned a lot later, that he borrowed some money from my godmother in America, which I don't think they've ever had back. I think they sort of gifted it to keep me going.
As you got more confidence and you stopped falling off, I hope, long enough to develop the confidence then to keep going, did that make you more ambitious? Or did it, in terms of competition results and getting more horses? I mean, talk a little bit more about that motivation and how you obviously became so much more competitive and so successful.
I don't think I ever was that competitive. I always wanted, my one ambition was to do my best. And Richard knew that, who was very much a sort of team leader, older than I, and I sort of came into the team and he was a captain. And he always used to get quite cross with me because I wouldn't admit to having a huge ambition. And he obviously did, and I think men do probably have a huge ambition. My ambition was to do my best, and if my best wasn't good enough, so be it. And it wasn't at Los Angeles Olympics. I was hot favourite to win it. And I think I came fifth. And I was absolutely delighted because my horse had done as well as he could possibly do in all three phases. I guess I was a cross-country in the showing. So, I wasn't nowhere near the medals, but I was delighted because that was as good as we could get. There were just 4 or 5 others better on the day. And that was really how I looked at it. And you set out to do your best, and your best may take years to come upon because training takes a long time.
Absolutely. Well, you went on to a lot more successes from there. At what point did you take an interest in actually coaching riders, and not just training horses, but coaching riders?
Only because a friend of mine who was a Bermudan guy and had lived in Canada for most of his career said, I want to give Canada something back. Will you come out and teach? And I said, well, if you really think that's going to give them something back, okay, but I'm going to charge you crazy money, and if you think you can get it, I'll come, because I do anything for a lot of money, but not for nothing. Basically, them a price isn't much different to what I charge now. And you've got 36 people a day, and I couldn't remember anybody's name, but now I teach 20 a day. 36 people. They all became yellow shirt, green shirt, and red shirt, because I couldn't think of anybody's name. There were so many of them coming through from 7 in the morning from 9 at night. A complete nightmare. But I earned my money, and actually, funny enough, joined the second one of those clinics this guy put on. I met the guy who was to be my pimp for the next 30 years. And he did literally become my agent and pimped me around Canada and then around America. So it's sort of self-profited in a way.
Yeah, and it clearly is obviously something that you're very successful at now and very, very popular. What, when you look back on your career, Lucinda, would you consider to be your career highlights then, with all that you've achieved?
Without a shadow of doubt, badminton, the first one, because at those days it never could possibly happen to you. It only ever happened to other people. It couldn't happen to you with your pony club horse. You'd had 7 years since pony club. But it did, so that was phenomenal. I mean, I shall never forget putting into his little tiny horse box where he could literally almost look out the windscreen. He was so close behind me, and turning on the radio for the 6 o'clock news or whatever and hearing, believe this or not, they never put it on the news now, hearing that the horse behind me had just won badminton. And it was only really then that I recognised that he really had. And I mean, so that was a moment you never ever forget. I was driving him home on my own, and there he was, just on the national news. And the next year we went round and crashed and burnt a mighty difficult fence that we'd opted to go the quick route through because we thought we were so good. And I think only one other person went the quick route through that particular fence, and they also fell. I remember my father saying something I've never forgotten. He said, you go out there to get the best job done you can, not to please the television cameras. And I never forgot him saying that, because in a way, that was probably what I did. I felt I'd won last year. I should go the fast route. I shouldn't be a chicken and go the slow route. Not understanding enough about the difficulty of the fence, which was too difficult, really, and I didn't have to do it, though. So there are a lot of lessons continue to be learned.
Well, clearly, and you're still competing now in your mid-60s, and you're still competing as, without a groom, as I said earlier, you just go out there and enjoy it for what it is. What is the motivation today?
There's a challenge to try and find the time, actually. That is the problem. I quite often think, gosh, I'd really like not to have to do any work and just have 2 horses and just try and make them again and do the best I can. One I've got to remember I've fallen off rather a lot of, and a lot of times I've fallen off, which I'm slightly surprised at, but I have a funny feeling that there's just something slightly weird with the horse. So I'm not going to ride him anymore, and I haven't got any plans to continue until somebody lands a nice horse in my lap, which may or may not happen because I certainly can't afford to go out there and buy one. The motivation is the same as it always was. I just love the feeling of a horse learning to trust you and putting his best foot forward and doing his best. And this horse was such a generous horse, such a kind horse, but had absolutely no initiative. It was the most extraordinary mix I've ever met, actually, in an animal. And the fence that he fell at the event that we did last couple of weeks ago, he simply canted straight through it. And I've never seen a video like it in my life, and I spend my life studying people's falls and trying to help them with how they could have done better. I think, holy Moses, I don't think I should ride him again because that one doesn't make any sense. I have no understanding at all. So whether he was coloured blind, it was like he might have been blind, and he isn't. I've had his eyes tested. So when you hit something like that, you can never ever trust that particular horse again because you don't understand why it went wrong. If you understand why it went wrong, you can trust again, and that's why I'm so keen on. And a lot of people don't. They say, don't dwell on it, don't look at it, just go on, you'll be all right. I do dwell on it because I want to know why it happened, and if I know why it's happened, I can deal with it. If I don't know why it's happened, I can't. And this is the first one I've ever known.
Yeah, but you're okay. You bounced back again.
Yeah, it was quite painful, actually. I hit the ground at some speed, and both of us, he, poor horse, I just felt so sorry for him, but he just didn't know what hit him. And he came up with a big hematoma on his chest, and I came up with a big one on my bottom. And we sort of limped off, but we're both doing great now, thank goodness.
And you're still, riding regularly, though. That's the great thing about the sport is, whilst we're still fit, we can continue to ride, well into our advancing years. Is there a point, if you're lucky? Yes. Yeah. Do you still want to compete, though? How much of the training and the coaching?
Oh, no, the training would be so boring without the competing. I wouldn't want to do it. You've always got to have something to aim for. And the teaching is a means of earning a living, but I have to say it's the most amazing means of learning, too. Sometimes I finish a class and I say, I should be paying you lot. You shouldn't be paying me. I've just learned so much off you guys and what your horses have done and what you've done. It's just taught me so much. And there are classes like that when you just are you do learn an incredible amount. And I don't know that I would have taught so much if I hadn't had to. But I've had to earn a living, and it's proved to be a monumentally fascinating road.
Yeah, and it takes you around the world, obviously keeps you very involved with the sport and the cutting edge of the sport because the sport keeps evolving, as we know. But when you look at the other things that you've contributed to the sport, not just as a team selector, as a journalist and, a clinician, well, what do they mean to you, Lucinda? What are you most proud of?
Well, I'm incredibly lucky to have been able to be involved in so many different aspects. And probably the thing that I find a little sad is that the sport appears to be very male-dominated, and I don't get listened to in a way I think that probably the experience that I have in so many different spheres for so long possibly should be. I know that I'm impulsive, and therefore some of the things I say need to be forgotten. But some things I think really do hold water, and it's sort of on an average of 10 years to get something through, which is a shame, really, because during that time things can go badly wrong. But that's what I've noticed, is an average of 10 years to get some critical point that I think makes a huge difference to the whole scenario. And then the thing that I would choose the most is the difference in the rider's balance, that you barely see anybody barring Chris Burton and Jock Paget, who are both incredibly successful in their own right, and long may they last doing what they do because it works for them. on the whole, most riders will ride in a much more defensive balance now than they ever used to. When I started, I was such a chicken. I learnt the defensive balance off my instructress, Pat Burgess, very, very early. And it's taken, I would say, it's taken 10 years to get that through to the general sort of run-of-the-mill riders from top to bottom. And probably about 5 years ago, I think they've got it now. It's fascinating how long that sort of thing can take. And it'll evolve again and change again. And that's about the only thing I don't think I will ever think that I actually was wrong. But then sometimes you believe in something and then years on you think, well, maybe I wasn't quite right about that. And you have to be like that. You have to be constantly questioning yourself, and you think things very strongly, believe in them very strongly. In 3 or 4 years' time, you may see another aspect of it and think, maybe I was just too narrow-minded about that. You have to be so flexy with your vision to try and understand and bring all the strands together so that you can make a calculation or make an understanding of what's going on, because the sport is forever evolving and forever hitting new problems. Because we're involved with the most special of all animals, i.e. a horse, we have a constant fight against the ever-increasing animal, if you like it, rights lobby. And it is very difficult because nobody likes seeing their horse fall over. And nobody who doesn't understand the sport likes seeing it either. So you try to create a sport that has horses run out at the fences and stop at the fences and not fall over. And every now and again, horses are only human. They make mistakes, things go wrong. And it is a problem. And we talk to the course designers about it now. They say it's really difficult to keep together the aspiration that cross-country should be the deciding phase of the three phases. And yet we can't show a front of horses falling over because the sport won't survive, because the animal rights are getting stronger and stronger. So it's a difficult one to equate. And the people that are maybe a little bit against the sport with horses, in some cases they might have a point. But I think probably in our sport more than any other, there's tremendous love for the horses, because they have to have so many different qualities to be an event horse, to be able to do three different things. And there's huge respect and huge love, and the last thing any of us really want is our horses to fall over or to be hurt. And yet we know that if we don't train them really well and ride them really well, that's always round the corner. And that is the challenge, if you like it, to make sure we don't in any way hurt our horse and ourselves are sort of slightly by the way. It's our horses we're worried about.
So at this point in life then, Lucinda, what's left on your bucket list?
I'd quite like to be able to help my daughter have as much fun as I had. But she's entered the sport at a very, very much more competitive time than I ever did. And the thing that I am sad about is that money does seem to talk much, much more than it ever did. And you do see people rattling by you riding very well on £100,000 horses. And that is debilitating when you simply don't have that sort of money and you've got quite a lot of talent. How do you actually get to put that talent into practice? And it was always like that. There was always talented people who couldn't afford to ride. But it's getting rider.
And so now what kind of a schedule do you have in a year then?
I want to need time to ride my horse, so I go in sort of 2-week bouts. And I don't do much teaching in England, but I go in 2-week bouts abroad, different countries. And then in Europe, I just go in 2-day bouts. And try and organise it so that I leave room around certain competitions. It's not easy because then the horse gets a sore foot and goes lame and you can't do the competition you wanted to. So now the only other one you can do is right in the middle of when you're teaching. And in fact, I had to change course to go to Houghton and had to ruin a clinic in Germany because of it. And that was expensive, it's also unreliable. I wonder if I might do that to people. And very rarely do cancel, but it was probably wise that they volunteered to take it off when they heard how close to the event it was. So that every now and again that does get tricky, but otherwise I try and plan it, the teaching, or I plan the events that I want to do on my horse around the teaching that I've got.
Yeah, and so popular, of course, wherever you go. Well, thank you, Lucinda, for your contribution to the sport and for all that you've achieved, and thank you for taking the time to come on the programme. Really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks so much. All the best. Bye-bye.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
And if you'd like to keep up with Lucinda on her worldly travels, you can do so on her Facebook page. She's very active on her Facebook page there, and we'll put a link in our show notes accompanying this episode on the website, as always, at wispsports.com. And, of course, there's a lot more coverage of women's sports right there on the website at wispsports.com. And you can also follow us on social media and join in the conversation on any of your favourite podcasts here at Wisp Sports. You could drop us a line to info@wispsports.com, or you can follow us on social media and post your comments there too. That's all at Wisp Sports. And do keep in mind that if you know any athletes whose story we should be sharing here on The Bolder Woman, then do drop us a line to info@wispsports and tell us why you're nominating the athlete. They must be over 50 and still active in sport and competitive in sport. I'll be back next week with another episode of The Bolder Woman. Until then, thank you for listening. And let's turn up the volume on women in sport everywhere.
This is your moment.